Two controversial figures that have been in the spotlight recently. We have Zohran Mamdani and we have Nick Fuentes. And this is what's kind of crazy, parallel between these two guys right now. People on the left are saying that Mamdani is the future of the left and the future of the United States. And There are a surprising number of people on the right who are saying that Nick Fuentes is the future of the right and the future of the United States. And I'm going to be arguing today that these two individuals are not the future of anything, but they are in fact history haunting us, that they're actually the manifestation of both sides of a destructive cycle that has occurred in the past and now is repeating in front of us again. And if we do not learn the lessons from history, we're about to go down a really bad path. We just recently did, I wasn't in this video, but we recently did an episode on Mamdani, who of course just won the spot as the mayor of the New York City. And he is, just a little bit about Mamdani, he's a self-described socialist. He's not like a left-wing guy that people are calling socialist. He's a socialist. And people are calling him a democratic socialist. He's not a democratic socialist. He's a socialist. That he's never called himself a democratic socialist. He's only called himself a socialist. He likes to talk about seizing the means of production. All of his policies are socialist policies, a government-run economy, government grocery stores, rent freezing, pitting the poor against the rich. The rich are the bad guys, and so they're greedy and they're exploiting all the poor. So we're gonna tax them more and yada yada yada. And if you are a fan of socialist policies, or if you're wondering what this is going to lead to, just take a look at the socialist and communist countries that we've had in the past and still have today. Look at Argentina, where we have millions of refugees and people starving to death. Look at the failed USSR. Look at North Korea. Look at China. In every instance that you've really had the socialist policies put in place, you've created a totalitarian state where millions of people are killed, hundreds of millions of people. I'm going to get into this, but communism and socialism has killed far more people than Hitler ever did, but hundreds of millions of people executed, prison camps, famine. Most people just died from famine. That's kind of usually what happens with communism. Your economy and your agriculture collapses. Now Mamdani, who wants to bring those same policies that destroyed Argentina and to New York City. So we'll see what happens there. But this is an important note before I continue on, in case anybody wants to nitpick me. I'm using socialism, communism interchangeably here. And I can do that because Karl Marx used socialism and communism interchangeably. Later on, because people will be like, oh, socialism is not the same thing as communism. Later on, after Karl Marx, communist socialists developed that a theory that socialism was a step between capitalism and communism. It's all hogwash. I don't have time to go into it, but the reality is the end is the same every time. You have the socialist communist policies. It is a totalitarian state that owns everything, and you have no rights, you have no freedoms. Everything in the state, nothing without the state. Is essentially what ends up happening. And so what's crazy right now is Mamdani, he's really popular. He's amongst the new left. Essentially what's happening right now is a lot of younger left-wing people are done with center-left people. They're done with the establishment left. And they're like, yes, Mamdani and people like him, anybody that is basically tooting the whole class warfare thing and is really a socialist or really communist-minded, are the people that are most popular. And my other evidence for this is, if you haven't heard of this guy, his name's Hassan Piker. He's the most popular left-wing streamer among young left-wing people, and he's a full-blown communist. He's said that he wished the USSR had won the Cold War instead of United States. He recently was simping for China, the current China Communist Party, and we know all the things that they're doing that are terrible. He just really honestly hates the United States. He said that. He said the United States deserved 9/11. And he's the most popular left-wing streamer, absolute radical. He was Mamdani invited him to his celebration party. And so that's the new left, right? That's the left. The young people are like, we want these guys, we want these radicals. We don't want the establishment anymore. We don't want Chuck Schumer, who's like center left or whatever. We don't want these establishment, longtime left-wing people that aren't radical enough. We want the radical people. And so I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about this. But I'm just saying that the left let's start with this position here. The left is not learning their lessons from the past, as I talked about what communism led to in the 20th century, and then again in the 21st century with places like Argentina. It's interesting to see that they haven't seemed to learn their lesson, and they're looking at this and saying the problem with U.S. politics is we're not socialist enough. We need to stop being just a little left leaning, and we need to go all the way. And so that's why Mamdani is being called the future of the left right now.
Yeah, man, I think that's very interesting. It's crazy to me that Mamdani and Fuentes are so different in so many ways, and so many takes on things. But you're essentially describing two sides to the same coin.
Yeah, I'll get to Nick Fuentes in a little bit, but yeah, you can steal my thunder. Go for it.
A dark shadow over, I'm not going to go there yet. I'm just shocked when I heard your idea for this video. I was kind of shocked that it even worked, but I was like, oh my gosh, that does make sense. But yeah, it's nuts. Like just seeing the supporters of the radical left and how Mamdani got people on his side using TikTok, social media. It literally is, they have too much money. You don't have enough. So I'm going to literally go take it from them, steal their money, give it to you. And that's what we're going to do. And if we all work together, we can do this. Like that's the movement. That's what it is. And it's crazy to me because obviously we've seen historically it doesn't work like you said, but then on a small scale, like New York City, for example, it doesn't work either because, well, the wealthy are just going to leave. They're like, well, I'm not going to let you take my money. I'm going to take it somewhere else. And y'all can be a failed city by yourselves. Like it just is. It's crazy to me that people think that that's a good idea, and in my mind, it's like, okay, if I am in their shoes, I'm going to be working hard, pulling myself up from my bootstraps. I'm going to start a company, start a business, or whatever it is. I'm going to get really good at something, and I'm going to improve my lot in life, and I'm not going to try to steal money from somebody else.
Yeah, no, it's a destructive ideology that is rooted in hatred and envy more than let's build something and let's build something that's productive and good. And the reverse flip side is true, which I'll get into a little bit as well. But there's the connection there between Mamdani and Nick Fuentes is very similar. So I'm going to talk a little bit about let's get into this historical lesson here about how communism created fascism and the difference between the two, and how communism helps us lead to fascism. Because now we're getting into like two sides of the coin thing here, which I'm going to address in several ways. One, political, and then at the end, if we have time, I'm actually going to address a little bit spiritual, psychological. But let's start with this. So this is, I'll pull this article up here because we're going to get into a little bit of history of Antifa. But if anybody doesn't know, most well-known fascists were the Nazis. Fascism was created initially by Mussolini, was Italian creator. And he was a socialist. He's an ex-socialist. He was kicked out of the Socialist Party because he supported Italy's involvement in World War I. And you'll actually find, if the creation of fascism, everybody that was fascist was an ex-socialist, or they still considered themselves to be socialists. For instance, the Nazis, who everyone considers to be fascist, the name stands for National Socialist German Workers' Party. Socialist is in the name. They considered themselves to be a branch of socialism, or kind of an alternative to socialism. Is complicated. So let's talk about Antifa quickly, so you can see how communism helps create its worst enemies. And so I already talked about the fascists came from socialism, or even still considered themselves socialists. Well, let's talk about Antifa very quickly. So this is how part of how the Nazis took power in Germany was the communist revolution just happened in the USSR. I talk about this in more detail in this episode here, but I'll get the real brief. And the USSR was like, all right, let's start a communist revolution in Germany. So they sponsored the Antifa club or whatever. Second largest communist party in the world was in Germany at the time, next to the USSR. And so what Antifa did was they labeled all the democratic and free market capitalist parties in Germany. They labeled them all as fascist, including also the Nazis as well. They labeled them as fascists as well. And nowadays, Antifa members nowadays will be like, we fought the Nazis back in World War. Not actually true. Their main enemy was the more popular middle parties, the Democratic and the capitalist parties. Everybody was their enemy. The Nazis just were also not communists, and so they were their enemies as well. But they called
They happen to
everybody
be on the
fascist.
list.
Say
Yeah.
what?
They happen to be on the
They just
list.
happened to be on the list because they weren't their party, right? So they called everybody fascist. So that's how normal democratic capitalist people suddenly became fascists, according to communists.
Investing can be confusing and scary, but it doesn't have to be. Genesis Gold Group takes the guessing out of the game and guides you on your gold investment journey. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the prepper bar, which breaks up into sections, kind of like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer high security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there, 100% owned by you. So don't wait to get started. Visit filibustedgold.com today for a free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.
So communists made their own arch nemesis, fascism, which was a useful arch nemesis for them. Be like, we're going to label everybody this bad thing, and then we're going to take power.
Sounds but they like what's happening today.
Which is exactly why I talk about in this video. It's exactly what Antifa still does and communists still do. That's why they call normal things like exercise or having families fascist. They label all these things as fascist now because it's the neo-Marxist stuff is like, being white and Christian is fascist, that kind of thing. And so what they did was they actually ended up pushing a lot of Germans, especially the middle-class Germans, they pushed them towards Nazism because they were like, these Antifa people are violent. They're violent, they're hurting people, and they're trying to start a violent revolution. And if we don't do something about it, we're all going to get killed, and they're going to take our states and they're going to kill us all. And so it actually helped push the country towards Nazism because they're like, well, these guys are going to protect us. And so this is just the beginning of how communism creates its self-declared arch nemesis, fascism, which fascism ends up being a reaction to the communism that's happening. So that's a lot of history. So I'll pause to let you reflect.
We're seeing the violent Antifa, protests happen today. We're seeing the No Kings protests that are a lot of times mixed in with Antifa or created by Antifa. We're seeing the BLM, very similar crowd. It's just like we're seeing these protests where it's like, okay, people are so scared. The government is so scared to react and to actually criminalize real, true criminal acts that are taking place at these protests. And so we just kind of let it happen. And people are starting to become very afraid. I have friends who moved out of Washington State because they were not safe in their hometown. They could not raise their kids in a safe environment because the protests were happening so often and because they had been labeled as, the enemy, the opposition or whatever. And so they could not even walk down the street anymore. And they moved to Texas. They got out of there. And so it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to violently respond? Are you going to, move to a different state? Are you going to flee the country? Or are you going to get involved in politics and, try to beat it from the inside out? Like what you're saying is there's people are moving towards, unfortunately, an extreme on the right, an alt-right extreme, and I think it's very dangerous, and it's like, it makes sense how communism creates fascism and how it pushes people that direction. But I think when we respond to evil in the wrong way, ultimately we can even make it worse, like you can't, I'm thinking of like Martin Luther King Jr., who said you don't beat hate with hate. You don't drive out hate with hate. Only love can do that. It's like sometimes there's only one kind of response that works. But love does not mean I'm going to roll over and become a doormat.
Right.
Love means I'm going to, still treat you as an individual, as a human being. And I'm not going to justify myself becoming what you are to fight you, but I am going to fight, but I'm not fighting to destroy something. Instead, I'm fighting to protect somebody,
Right.
So that's very different.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about like a mature love that builds a healthy society versus a reactive hate that actually serves to just destroy even more. Because a large, you look at World War II, and this wasn't the only thing that was going on, but some of what came down to was the USSR, which is communism, versus Nazi Germany, which is fascism. And now, and that's there's no good side on that. They're both horrendously evil. USSR murdered so many people. Nazis murdered so many people. And they're both completely envious, corrupt ideologies, right? But then they're opposite reactions to each other, and pitting them against each other again is not something that we want to do. That's replaying a destructive cycle as opposed to something that's constructive. So continuing that, let's get right into it. So this is the full connections. So the other day we did, the reason I made all these connections, and I'm not the only person that's been trying to make some kind of connections between Mamdani and Nick Fuentes, but you have to think about it because they've both been so in the news. Nick Fuentes has been in the news because he did a interview with Tucker Carlson, so that got him really brightly in the spotlight because he's kind of been pushed away to censored and then pushed away to like the dark corners of the internet or whatever. Just he's on Rumble. It's not
for
the dark
good reason.
corners of the internet. Not we're on Rumble too. Rumble's great, but it's just he got blocked from YouTube a long time ago. So he did an interview with Tucker Carlson, so that made him a little more like mainstream all of a sudden, and now everybody's talking about him. And so we did this discussion, and I will fully admit I was very soft on Nick Fuentes throughout this whole discussion for two reasons. One, because I wanted to take very seriously what I think are the serious issues that not just Nick Fuentes, but mainly thinking about people that are following him and like Nick Fuentes and like the stuff that he talks about. I want to take those seriously. So if you want to go watch that video, you can, because I try to take some of those seriously, and I want to get more into some of those issues even in the future as well, especially stuff like around like Jewish interest groups and like Israel and AIPAC and stuff like that. I want to talk more about that stuff in the future. Don't have time for it now. So I want to take those things seriously because he does bring up serious concerns. But the other reason I was soft on him was because honestly, I hadn't seen all the stuff that he had said, because I'd only seen like small edited clips leading up to this. And then this interview is super tame. And so you showed some stuff that he had said, and I've learned more. And so having longer to reflect on it and seeing like what he actually stands for, things that he said, I think it's pretty clear kind of what his ideology is. So this is what has occurred, right? So we have a reaction now. Nick Fuentes is this reaction to neo-Marxism. So neo-Marxism is the new communism. The old communism was just class-based, like poor versus the rich. But it's not just that anymore. Now they've included this really racial and cultural element to where the oppressive bad guys are not just the capitalists. They've connected that to this whole system in their mind of like white people, men, patriarchy, Christians, because Christians is like the dominant religion in the West, all Western values, anything it means to be like a conservative American or conservative in general. You're all part of the same like evil capitalist mindset, right? And so it's all got lumped in years ago. And what's been going on is the conservatives have been playing defense since like the early 2010s was when this really ramped up. And the left and the communists, the socialists, have been calling conservatives all racist and sexist and fascist for just existing, for literally just being a white person, being American, being conservative, being Christian. You're all these things. And so we're always on defense, for years. It's like conservatives are like, well, I'm not and
that's
racist.
not to say
I'm not sexist. We have to explain ourselves for everything. I'm not fascist. You're like, no, I'm not fascist. I'm conservative. And you have to explain yourself. Sorry, what were you going to say?
That's not to say that there's not examples of those things going on both sides, but at the same time, getting called those things just for existing is just completely unfair and uncalled for. And
it's so demoralizing and exhausting to be like to try to like explain yourself or defend yourself. And so what has happened is a certain portion of the right has adapted and changed and said, hey, communism sees the new communists see fascism and Hitler as like the devil, and it's their arch nemesis, and it's the only thing that they're afraid of, and it's the thing that they talk about all the time. If we use this, we can destroy them with it. And so now you have people like Nick Fuentes who's saying, I am racist, and it's offense. They're using it as an offense. They're not defensive anymore. They're saying, yeah, I'm the thing that you hate. I am racist. I am sexist. I am a fascist. I don't know if Nick Fuentes has actually called himself fascist, but he is fascist, and I'm going to get into it right here. But that's going on the offense because you get demoralized, being like, I'm getting hit all the time, as saying, and so now I'm turning around and being like, I'm going to hit you back. And so that's exactly the reaction that you're doing.
Fire with fire. Yeah.
Exactly. Fighting fire with fire. Real quick before I let you chime in here, Nick Fuentes, my argument, of course, is that he is fascist. He lands underneath the fascist kind of role because many things. I call him Mr. I think Hitler is cool. Nick Fuentes, that's in my notes here. He said that he thinks Hitler is cool. He's also said he's a fan of Stalin. So this is kind of the fascist playbook, using traditionalism as like a means to an end of like, oh, look, let's be traditional so that we can garner support, but he's not actually traditional. The Nazis were the same way. They used Christianity because it was traditional for Germans, but they had nothing Christian about them. So for multiple things for him, American traditionalism, you know, he makes this call to like American traditionalism, but at the same time, he doesn't like the Constitution. He doesn't actually like the way that the United States was set up at all. And when people have pushed him on that, they're like, wait, you don't want America to go back to being more American. And he's like, no, I want it to be better. He wants to do away with the Constitution. He wants it to be more authoritarian. Well, it's like, well, you're not traditional. You're progressive in the same way that fascism was progressive. It's a progressive form of government where it's like, we're going beyond the traditional forms of government in the past, like constitutional republics. And we're going to go towards something that's a lot more authoritarian. He's also, you know, he claims to be Catholic, but he also tells his audience that he wants them to kill people and rape people in his name. And that's not Christian. There's nothing that's Christian about that. And so it's like, you're using the labels for Christianity to, you know, try to unify like a homogenous group. He's also, of course, yes, he's called himself a racist. He wants there to be a white America. It's you know, segregation, and it's moving towards race-based culture instead of an actual Christian culture. Instead of like a righteous Christian culture being his main idea, it's actually just like, well, no, it's really just like the white culture, because if we have the white culture, then we can be this homogenous culture. And that's what allows for a stronger, you know, nation. So you can have that more authoritarian state. And then of course, blaming the Jews for everything. So that's the fascists, you know, I have my in ethnic group, I have my out ethnic group, you know, in the same way that communists have their in economic class and their out economic class. So the capitalists get blamed for everything. Well, with Nick Fuentes, the Jews get blamed for everything. It's an overly simplistic worldview of, I got to find my demon so I can help strengthen my in group by having an out group. And so that's the demon who just gets blamed for everything. And so I just think it's a false dilemma. I really do. Like fascism and communism, these things weren't invented until like 100 years ago. And yet we get into this false dilemma where it's like, you're either going to be communist or you're going to be fascist. Take your pick. Which one's better? And it's just like, I disagree. I just don't think that it's a dichotomy that you have to choose between. What do you think about this?
I 100% agree, Reese. You know, I think I'm just reminded of like that meme that pops up, that Christian meme where it's like, you know, Islam says convert or else we're going to kill you. Christianity says, I'm going to try to convert you because I believe this is the best thing for you. And I'm going to still keep talking about Jesus even if you kill me. You know, like it's the difference is I am here to be a servant of all. I'm here to serve other people. And true traditional Christianity, you know, and the true Christian values that this nation was built upon, like that still rings true. You know, like I'm not here to destroy. My main goal is not to destroy a group. It's not to destroy somebody else, not to destroy the other side. My main group is to help the whole, you know, and how do I do that? How do I build up? How do I make this a better place? Not by taking somebody else out, but by adding benefit to the whole, you know, and that's so different than both of these sides. Both of these extremes say, here's the enemy, and it's all focused on, you know, communism is like, well, the rich is the enemy or this group is the enemy, and it's all focused on taking what they have, you know, and then the other side is, you know, like, no, here's the enemy, you know, and it's all focused on shutting them down, you know, and raising yourself up. And it's like, no, this country was built on values that say all men are created equal, you know, and we all have, you know, the right to pursue life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. You know, like we have these inalienable rights that our Constitution and the Bill of Rights talk about that I believe are still there. You know, I believe we can still, but I think a lot of times it's like we've gotten so selfish and so self-minded as a culture that we've started justifying extremes because what it has ended up mattering the most is that I feel like I got what I wanted, you know, and like Nick Fuentes says, it's the same problem with communism, you know, same problem with stealing other people's money that they worked for. And it's like, yeah, I guess you could say, I guess you could say, well, what if they didn't get that money ethically, right? Does that justify you not stealing their money and unethically getting it from them? I mean, one evil does not justify another evil, right? But it's the same problem that Nick Fuentes has. He says, I'm America first, right? But then he doesn't even want he doesn't want to make America better. He wants to change it into something different. So he's actually Nick Fuentes first. You know, like that is the problem. Is like we've got a culture of I'm first, everybody else is after me. Which model is going to fit that, that mindset and going to help me stay on top, instead of saying, well, what if I didn't go first? What if I chose to put my neighbor first? What if I chose to put my coworker first? What if I actually chose to put my boss first? Like that's a very different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the traditional Christian mindset, is you love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, it's not me and then everybody else. And that's just a different way of looking at it, and it's sad to say that we live in a world that doesn't understand that concept anymore. The golden rule is out the window,
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get back to it. And I think people who truly are Christian and not just Christian in name, they understand that, that appeal, and they want to get back to that as well as a culture. And it starts with us, it starts right here. It doesn't start with, figuring out how to fix Nick Fuentes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be out there doing crazy things.
Sure.
But it starts with us making sure that we're living the way that we're supposed to be living.
Yeah, I love that. I think what you're talking about is a true Christian cultural revolution is what I would call it, because when I think of, like, I've talked about Christian nationalism before, and I think there's an appetite for sensible nationalism. People realize that we've swung away too far to where it's like, that's why America First is a thing. That's why MAGA is a thing. Is people like, wait a second, we've swung away from basically sensibly being able to see our nation as like a sovereign nation and take care of it and do what's best for it and enforce rules, enforce borders, just like enforce common sense things. We've seen so many good wins for this, but we still need, what I would say, like a Christian cultural revolution where you're not going to, it's not like, in my mind, Christian nationalism is not we're Christians, but we're going to go violently storm and take over and crush anybody else. It's a grassroots up, like we are, connecting to the culture, and we are now, giving the shining the light into the culture, and now the culture is changing to become more Christian, and then that's going to affect, and it can affect top down, it can affect bottom up. But it's going to have, a redemptive, change and a redemptive effect. And I do think that there still is a option and even an appetite for a kind of sensible Christian and also nationalism in the sense of prioritizing our nation because we live here and we want it to see it be good and godly, and protecting it from, outside influences, outside forces that are undermining it. It's like you can address these things without going extreme and without going hatefully, violently extreme,
Gold is not just a backup plan if the world falls apart. It's an investment opportunity that could set you up for generations. There's never really a bad time to invest in gold, but you want to make sure you have the right guide. And that is where Genesis Gold Group shines. Whether you are a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, their trusted expertise and competitive pricing makes them an easy choice. They offer tangible assets in case of emergencies, but they can also design the perfect IRA just for you. And they'll even cut through all that confusing red tape from the IRS. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer a more high-security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there and 100% owned by you. Genesis Gold Group is a safe, simple, and convenient way to invest. Visit filibustedgold.com today for your free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.